I'm here in northern China, where just a few years ago an amazing set of circumstances took place. It has taken all this time for some of the facts to be finally come clear. In the fall of 1931, the scene was set for an event to take place that would change the course of history. The Japanese were enthralled by the concept of surpassing their superiors, known as Gakukucho. At this point in history, the Japanese had reason to believe that the Chinese people were their superiors. The Chinese people had far more territory and a much greater population. The territory known as Manchuria, which lies in the northeastern tip of China, was a dispute after the Russo-Japanese War. The Japanese were given control of the railroads in the area. Certain Japanese officers stationed in the Manchuria devised a plan to take control of Manchuria and thus carry out the philosophy of Gakukujo. By taking military control of Manchuria, the Japanese would reign their dominance supreme over power of China. The scheme involved using a small amount of explosives to blow up a section of the train tracks, which in turn would derail an oncoming train. Explosions caused would be blamed on the Chinese officers stationed in the area. The incident would then be blamed on the Chinese, and then the Japanese military would have an excuse to invade the Manchurian province of China. When the Japanese military officers finally executed their plan, it couldn't have gone worse. The officers used such a small amount of explosives material that the explosion caused very little to no damage to the tracks. The tracks were virtually unharmed. The damage to the tracks was so minimal, in fact, that an oncoming train crossed over the area without even noticing that something was wrong. Despite the minor scope of the incident, the Japanese commanders and the Emperor Hirohito used that as an excuse to start a full-fledged invasion of the Manchurian province of the Chinese lands. The day after the incident, the Japanese opened fire on the Chinese encampment in the area. They also proceeded to destroy the very small Chinese Air Force. And at the end of the first day of fighting, the Japanese troops had already taken the lives of 500 Chinese troops and controlled the town of Mukden, Manchuria. It took the Japanese another 5 months to conquer the provinces of Liaoning, Jilin, Heila, Jiaying. Despite some of the resistance from the Chinese army, it was relatively easy for the Japanese to accomplish this task of taking over the parts of China. Good intelligence helped the Japanese plan their attack at the ideal moment. On the Chinese side, the loss of Manchuria brought much turmoil. Despite the fact that China's forces outnumbered the Japanese 23-1, the Japanese army was still able to carry out their mission. On paper, this could not have been able to happen. The Chinese leaders, because of the seeming lack of leadership, there were various reasons that the Chinese forces were overrun. The first, that was the Chinese forces nearby in Korea were unable to support by railway. Secondly, the Chinese forces in the north and south were too scattered to mount a strong enough counterattack. Thirdly, the Chinese military did not stack up against the Japanese forces. The Japanese were more unified and cohesive force with large guns. The Japanese troops were better trained and better led. On the top of the Chinese forces had low morale, and many questioned their loyalty to China. The linchpin in the ability of the Japanese to carry out their mission was the infiltration of the Japanese secret agents into the Chinese command system. In the past, the Chinese had actually relied on the Japanese military advisors. This fact gave them the Japanese great insight into the entire Chinese military machine, and all this to the fact that the Chinese government was dealing with a myriad of problems within their own ranks, and it created a perfect storm for what happened. The Chinese government was forced to turn to international support to resolve the catastrophe within their borders. The Chinese foreign minister appealed to the Japanese government and the League of Nations to help. On October 24th, the League of Nations passed a resolution that demanded a withdrawal of Japanese troops, then completed on March 14th, November 16th, and October 18th. This resolution was met with abstinence from the Japanese government, with the two nations on devotional for some time, with no success. Last page. After all these years, there is still much controversy surrounding the Manchurian incident. There is debate as to who actually exploded the Japanese railway. Some evidence points to the youthful officers of the Kuomintang army. Official investigators into the incident conducted after the war to prove without a doubt that the plot was conceived by the Japanese, but who actually detonated the bomb is unknown. Some historians suggest that the Japanese leadership may have been more involved than they were letting on. Some are arguing that the Japanese were complicit in lower-ranking officers to antagonize the Chinese. Don't know what that means. We may never know all the details as to what actually happened in the fall of 1931 on March 14th. But one thing is for sure. History will continue to move forward.